We're talking about urban development and sprawl. There's something called Plan Bay Area out there, and it's a collaboration of 4 regional government agencies coming up with housing and transportation plans, and this is all in response to the California Sustainable Communities and Climate Protection Act 2008. And what it does is it requires each of the state's 18 metropolitan areas to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from cars and light trucks 7% per capita by 2020 and 15% by 2035. Now, I don't know if that's a tall order, but we're going to find out from our expert here right now. With me in the studio is Rapport. He is the Executive Director of the Association of Bay Area Governments, otherwise known as ABAG. So I hope I got all that right, because that's a lot of words to talk about something that you consider to be very important to the Bay Area.
Yes, it's a plan for the future. It's a way of the agencies to work with local government, make sure that neighborhoods are being planned in a way that people really will appreciate in the future, and that it's connected to a transit system that's close to employment.
What motivated the legislature in 2008 to make this happen?
Well, I think part of it is the work that ABAG was doing already with MTC, where we recognized that if we didn't do the planning for future land uses, that we were going to end up with a lot more growth in the urban periphery or in the Central Valley, and that was going to produce an enormous congestion problem on the highways. So to build an alternative to that, we were inviting cities to look at their neighborhoods and see where they think growth would be appropriate, and then help fund their planning costs to make sure that their neighborhoods were actually being developed as a whole and not working it project by project.
Well, what kind of reaction are you getting? I know there's been some controversy in some neighborhoods.
There's been a few pockets of the Bay Area, which is a large region where there's a lot of anti-development, but mostly in the areas where we're planning on 98% of the growth, which is in the heavy infrastructure areas around the East Bay and the West Bay and the Peninsula and South Bay. The local governments have been the ones who've been driving their own priority development areas, which are the ones that will get the funding for future planning and infrastructure.
So if I'm hearing you right, the governments who get on board with this and come up with a plan to better increase housing potential and better transportation will get grants.
Right.
To help them with this.
Right, because planning monies are not easy to come by. I mean, everybody's struggling with public services. They don't have enough money to plan the future. Usually those are the first cuts that they have to make. So if there's an option for transportation dollars to be used to help them with appropriate neighborhood planning and improving their amenities in the areas that are grossly underutilized now, then they're very happy to do that.
Sure. Yeah, nobody has any money anymore, so this is a great idea. So where are the areas that you see have the biggest concerns? I know San Francisco must be one of them.
Oh, in terms of the concerns are mostly in the North Bay, where very little of the growth is actually being planned. So that's where I think you see some of the protest movements. But there are special studies that are needed in the big cities, which are looking at some pretty extensive growth in the future, and we have to make sure that the infrastructure can support that level of development.
So we're talking about a combination of housing, more dense housing, perhaps, and better transportation to access all of that.
Yeah, it's not one size fits all. There's much higher density. It's in the big central cities than there is in the transit corridors, which are mostly 3- or 4-story buildings that are appropriate to size. And we're not asking any small towns to take on any burden or change their character.
I know one small town was really opposed to this, like Corte Madera, right?
Yes, I think there's been an awful lot of misinformation that's been spread that the regional agencies are imposing mandates or they're going to change the way people live,
sure. When
actually these are all local government plans. Every priority development area has been self-nominated by local government. They have full control over how it works. But when we offer dollars for planning through the transportation mechanism to tie it to transit, a lot of cities stepped up to that. So we have 70 jurisdictions participating in about 170 priority development areas.
Wow. All right. So one quick question. Concern about water, and how's that going to be confronted?
Well, this type of compact development is actually very efficient for energy and water and other kinds of services. It's much easier to recycle, for example. So most of the water districts can supply urban water. There are a couple of pockets where it's more of a problem, let's say in Marin, but in general, I think the utilities are able to handle the growth in the future. That may end someday, but there's still enough capacity.
A major traffic study already claims the Bay Area has the second worst commute in the nation. Nearly 60,000 new jobs were created in San Francisco and Silicon Valley last year, and that number is expected to be higher this year, putting more strain on the highway system.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the plan is that highway widening is not a big part of the plan. There are no new freeways per se in this plan.
No. Here in the Bay Area, stakeholders looking into the economic future of the region said better transportation is crucial for job growth.
The name of the game is regional, and it's public-private partnerships.
Levi's Stadium will warm people up to support and ride public transit once they take it to games.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the plan is that highway widening is not a big part of the plan. There are no new freeways per se in this plan.